I'm glad I caught that because I want to watch this talk again. This is more than I can hold in my mind. I have notes. All right, so let's get into it. There is the cliche idea that every cloud has a silver lining, or that every pain is a teacher. And like most cliches, there's some truth to that. There is some truth to that. I can get behind that statement. But then the question must be asked, how? Okay, great. There's some wonderful teaching inside of this pain. How do I access it? How do I access it? And the practice offers us many answers to that question, many methodologies. But we're just going to focus on one today, on the practice of R.A.I.N, the acronym R.A.I.N. Recognize, accept, investigate, and non-identify. This is a teaching that I received from the Dharma Teacher Tara Brach, who some of you may be familiar with. She's a senior teacher in the Insight Meditation Society, a tradition out of Barre, Massachusetts, that was founded by Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, and Sharon Salzberg, three American Dharma teachers that started traveling east to places like Thailand and Burma for instruction back in the late 60s. So Tara Brach is one of their senior teachers, and she's famous for a book called Radical Acceptance. She's very good at teaching us how to love and understand ourselves. And this acronym is one of her teaching tools. So let's go through it step by step. First, the R, recognize. And what this means is, in order to even have a chance to be able to manage myself, I must first be aware of myself, right? No self-awareness, no self-management. Just like if I was the boss of a group of other people, how could I manage them and their tasks and their responsibilities and their trials and their triumphs if I didn't even know what they were doing, if I never came to the office, if I never looked at their reports, if I never met with them? I could not do that. And the same is true here in the committee of Dave. If I am not, and hear me use this word because I choose it very deliberately, if I am not constantly checking in with myself, then it's very difficult to manage myself. It's very difficult to manage myself because when do problems arise? All right? Do problems arise when I'm doing something super fun that very naturally draws all my attention to it, like eating an ice cream? Do I tend to have a problem then that requires some management? No. Right? When problems tend to come up is when I am doing, thinking, saying, in some way experiencing something that is hard, something that I don't want, something that maybe is easier for me to deny. And so you can see the paradox there. You can see the difficulty there. Precisely when I need my management the most, I am of the habit to be unaware, because our natural habit is to turn away from pain, Something difficult happens, and I go into the distraction of social media. Something terrible happens, and I want to anesthetize myself with some substance. Right? We don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to feel the pain. And so we don't even want to recognize that it's happening. We don't even want to recognize that it's happening. Just like when you're having a terrible day and you walk into a room of people who care about you, whether it's walking home, into your home, whether it's walking into the office, and somebody asks you how you're doing, and you don't want to say how you're really doing. You don't want to turn to that person and say, well, my Monday so far has brought me to the point of existential crisis. I am overwhelmed with anxiety, touching depression, and gritting my teeth with rage right now. We don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so instead, we avoid, we deny, we say things like, I'm fine. I have 100 joking answers for the question of how I am, all of which in 100 different ways artfully lie. Oh, I'm good enough for government work. Oh, I'm doing better than I deserve. On and on and on. But all of these euphemisms point to the universal truth that we are designed, when we touch the hot plate accidentally, when we touch the hot pan on the stove, to pull away. Right? At that level, think about it even deeper than your thoughts, even deeper than your personality. At a biological level, we are designed to quickly retract from pain. Retract from pain. This habit, which benefits us sometimes, causes us a lot of difficulty and suffering as well. Because as we've all experienced, right? We're all adults here on the call. We've all experienced countless times avoiding something only for it to grow worse and worse and bigger and more urgent. So the very first step is bare recognition. Is figuring out a way, integrating our mindfulness practice into our lives enough that we maintain a baseline recognition, a baseline raw awareness of what's actually happening. Am I sitting? Am I standing? Am I lying down? The very basics, like where is my body in space? Am I happy, sad, anxious, calm, neutral, mixed? Which is most often the answer, that I'm experiencing a mixture of emotions. This is right out of the gate. Practice 1, just the R in R.A.I.N, is quite a tall order. It is not easy to be recognizing over and over and over again what is actually happening to us. This is where the practice comes in. It's not enough to spend this hour together once a week. That will not keep me in a state of recognition. It is not enough to sit my cushion for 20 minutes each morning and set the tone of my day as I try to do. That will not keep me the other 23 hours and 40 minutes of the day in a state of recognition. Those are dedicated. This is a dedicated practice. Right? A practice where I wear a certain thing, where I sit a certain way, where that happens at a certain time. Dedicated practice. But in order to stay all the live long day in a state of recognition, I must also have integrated practices. I must also have practices that are happening all day long. So for me, I use my body as one of the basic mindfulness bells. So every time I transition from, say, this posture, sitting cross-legged, to standing, that is an opportunity to become aware. How am I really doing? What am I really feeling? What am I thinking right now? Passing through a doorway, right? Transitioning from inside to outside or from one room to another room. This is another opportunity to integrate a breath of mindfulness. I'm making a transition here. I'm going from the living room to the kitchen. I'm walking from my office desk to the restroom. Can I give myself permission with those few steps down the hallway to the restroom to have an integrated moment with myself, to touch my mindfulness practice? Is whatever I'm thinking so important that I have to keep thinking it for the steps down that hallway? Or can I release it just for one moment and take a look at it with a little bit more perspective? Upon first waking is an opportunity to have an integrated moment of mindfulness. Right? The Gata, the poem for practice in the Plum Village tradition, in our tradition, the tradition of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, our teacher, is waking up this morning, I smile. A brand new 24 hours is before me. I vow to look at all beings with the eyes of compassion. This is a way to start each day. Integrated practice, right? Start each day reminding myself, like, oh, this is what I care about. Let me check in. How am I doing there? You can very easily make up your own. What do you do every day? Do you do the dishes every day? Can you do those in a state of mindful self-awareness? Do you make the bed every day? Can you do that in a state of mindful self-awareness? And on and on and on. Right. So this is the first step. The first step, before we get into the advanced practices of like, oh, how do we do this when we're in tremendous pain or when we're grieving, right? We will never be able to be mindful when the stakes are really high if we have not trained when the stakes are low. But long before the athlete wins the race or gets the gold in the marathon, they're training when nobody's looking. They're training when nobody's looking, when there is no competition and there is no timer. It's the same for us here. We have to be training all the time, in those moments that are neutral, in those moments that are positive. And that's when we develop the strength, the balance, the experience, the understanding, so that we can bring the weight, the power of that training to those moments that are intense, to those moments that hurt us, to those moments when we are afraid. So it begins there, cultivating over long periods of time a consistent practice of bare recognition. This is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. This is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. One of my favorite words or phrases for this, and many of you have heard me say it, is simply taking up the practice of saying, and this, and this. This is what's happening right now, be it positive, negative, neutral, or mixed. And this segues us into step number 2 of the 4 steps of R.A.I.N, acceptance. If you take up the practice of bare recognition, if you start to, in a more granular way, moment by moment instead of year by year, if you start to moment by moment train yourself with enough concentration to filter through all of the distraction and to actually experience your life, which is another way to say recognize, you will very quickly notice that the vast majority of what you're experiencing, you do not accept. Right? Much more of what's happening is a constant dissatisfaction. It's the first of our four noble truths in Buddhism. Right? Dukkha, as it's called in the ancient Pali. Constant dissatisfaction. Right? We're not in acceptance of almost anything. Right? Just as soon as I finished eating, I may touch hunger again. No matter how much I sleep, I slept for 9 hours last night, but I still didn't want to get out of the bed. I still wanted more. No matter how much water I drink, I will still touch thirst again. Our physical nature, our mental makeup, our emotional body, everything that we are is subject to the law of impermanence, that everything is of a nature to change. We, much to my chagrin, are built to seek a happiness in this impossible, in this unattainable permanence. No matter how delicious the cheesecake is, no matter how ecstatic each bite is, there is a part of me that is tracking how the piece is diminishing. There is a part of me that is growing more and more anxious, less and less satisfied, less and less calm as I take each bite and get closer to the end of the cake. This is hardwired in us. This is hardwired in us. And so as we go about our day in recognition, our first experience is we will see that we are very rarely in acceptance. We're mostly in some kind of complex rejection of what's happening. Oh, okay, this is okay, but it could be better. All right, here's another problem. All right, here, they've got to fix this. Oh, things will be okay when this has changed. If we look honestly enough at our day and the story we're telling ourselves, we will see this. We will see this. This causes us untold suffering. Untold suffering. And because we're doing this all day long, even when things are good, even when we're eating our favorite piece of cheesecake, you can imagine how painful it is when something terrible happens. Right? If I'm in a lack of acceptance all the time, how can I possibly accept it when I'm injured and in constant pain for a while? How can I possibly accept it when someone I love dies? How can I possibly accept it when another horrible thing reminds me of the suffering in the world, the death, the destruction, the disease, the starvation, the war? The answer is that's not possible. That's not possible. The only way I can bring the quality of acceptance to the difficult things is if I train myself now to bring the quality of acceptance to the positive things and the neutral things first. Now, semantics are important here. Acceptance does not mean agreement. Just because I accept that the United States is keeping children in cages at the Mexican border right now, just because I am not in denial of that, that doesn't mean I agree with that, because I do not agree with that. That is not okay. That is not in keeping with my values. It causes me great pain that I am an active and co-creating and contributing part of a system that is so cruel. But I cannot deny that that is happening. I must accept it because it is. Acceptance is not surrender. If I work for myself, but if my hypothetical boss, is yelling at me right now, and I want to sit there in acceptance of it, in acceptance, like this is happening, this is real. That's not the same as me surrendering. That's not the same as me deciding like, that's okay. My boss can talk to me like this. I deserve it. That is not what I'm saying when I say accept that moment. Nobody is allowed to talk to me that way. That is never okay, whether it's my boss or my lover. That's nobody gets to yell at me and call me names. I'll never surrender to that. But I can accept it. I can accept, like, this is happening right now. Like, fighting against this, putting tons of energy into wishing this wasn't happening, or worse, more dangerously, pretending that this is not happening, is not going to help me. It's not going to help me. Right? So acceptance is just starting from a place of recognizing and embracing, like, okay, this is the moment I get to practice with. This is what is real right now. And let me take it in. Let me take it in before trying to fix it or change it. Just like if the child is crying, we all know that one of the worst things I can do is tell them, oh, it's not so bad, stop crying. That's not going to help them. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help the greater situation. Right? Even if I do think that they just skinned their knee and they're being dramatic and it's not that big a deal, even if that's true, first I must recognize, oh, the child has scraped their knee and is crying. And then I must accept, oh, come over here. Oh, let me give you a hug. Accept it, embracing it. If I start there, then everything after has a much higher chance of success than if I start in some kind of denial or repression or rejection of the moment. And then we move into step number 3, into the R.A.I.N, the investigation. Now, it may seem as I'm going through these that I am teaching something that happens in a linear fashion, but that's not really accurate. A better way to think of these 4 steps is that they're all happening simultaneously, that they're all happening together and in support of one another. This is much more real. This is much more how our brains and our emotions work. We speak and attempt to think and explain things to each other in very linear and methodical manners. But that's not how we tend to experience things. We tend to experience things all mixed up and all happening at the same time. That's why it's possible to be laughing and crying simultaneously. And that doesn't make sense in a linear world, but the world is not linear. Our experience is much more of a circle. It's all kind of happening at the same time. But for the purposes of understanding and the way our brains work and the way our language works, it makes sense for me to explain this in a step-by-step manner. But don't be confused. Understand that all of these will likely be happening at the same time in real-world application. So if I'm recognizing that something is happening and accepting, okay, this is my reality, not just and this, but more like yes and this, yes and this, even to the challenges, even to the dissatisfactions, then I have this opportunity. In that recognition and acceptance, a spaciousness is provided. A container is created. I have brought the moment in. I have embraced it in my mindfulness. In that spaciousness, in that container, is room for some very deep investigation. It's then that I can start to really learn from these positive, negative, neutral, and mixed experiences. And this brings us to the theme of the talk today. It is then that I can start to learn from my pain, if the moment happens to be a painful one. If I'm not wasting my energy, failing to recognize, right, being in some kind of denial all the time, if I'm not wasting my energy in a constant rejection, but at pushing things away, pushing everything that's painful away, is very effortful. It takes a lot of time and energy. It doesn't leave the time or energy for investigation. Right? But if I have recognized and accepted, then all of a sudden I'm in this container, right, of mindfulness with energy, time to investigate what's actually taking place. And then and only then can I learn from it. Then and only then can I see, for example, the connection between grief and gratitude, for example. Right? If I'm in denial, if I'm not even acknowledging that I'm grieving the loss of a person, of a job, moving to a new city, on and on, all these things we mourn, all these endings we grieve, if I'm in denial of it, how can I ever learn from it? But if I'm not, and I investigate it deeply, I will see very quickly that, oh, my grief is always connected to some kind of gratitude. I would not be mourning the fact that I don't live in New York City anymore if I didn't love New York City. I love New York City. It's where I'm from. It's one of the most amazing, magical places in the world. I'll probably never live there again for a variety of good reasons. And that sometimes causes me pain. I grieve over that. But I wouldn't have that pain. I wouldn't experience that grief if there wasn't love there. If there wasn't love there, I would have no cause to mourn something if I didn't love it and therefore miss it. That's just one example of how, when I've created the appropriate container to do so, my investigations can be very illuminating. Because in the end, when I look into what is causing me pain, especially things that cause me maximum pain, things that drop me down to my hands and knees and make me cry like a baby, when I look into those things, I get to see who I really am. Because I am only experiencing that level of pain if I'm being touched in a place that really matters to me. in a place where I really reside, in my heart, in my heart. And so that kind of investigation, even when it's painful, has the opportunity to teach me who I really am, what I really care about, in a way more neutral or more exciting or seemingly positive moments don't always have the opportunity to do. And then the last step is the N in RAIN, non-identification. Non-identification. There's a lot of ways to talk about what that means. One of the funny things about Zen practice is that we end up, as we have here, in a place where I want to talk about something in words that I know cannot be described in words. Words will always fall short. I can't really describe what I am, what we are, in words. But there's an old Buddhist teaching called the 8 Worldly Winds. And I know the screens are small. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this. I'm just going to hold up a little way I like to draw out the 8 Worldly Winds, just so you can understand as I'm talking that it's a wheel. So sometimes I like to draw it like this. And you see how that wheel has 4 spokes going through it. And on the opposite side of each of those spokes are some opposite paradigms. Pain and pleasure, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. Right? All these opposites, pain and pleasure, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. And the Buddha was very clear that our life unavoidably will touch all 8 of those worldly winds. And at different times in your life, you'll feel like you are gaining something. And then at other times, you will feel like you are losing something. And sometimes you will feel as if you are in pain. And other times, you will experience the absence of pain and the attendant pleasure. On and on. And in each moment, as the wheel turns, as we go through these 8 worldly experiences, it would be very easy to identify with that moment, to experience, for example, some praise, and to identify with that. Be like, look at me, I'm awesome. People are praising me, yes. But the more I identify with that, the more I tell myself the story that that's who I am, and that's what's important, and that's how I will be successful. That's what I need, more praise. The more I attach and identify to that one aspect of the 8 worldly winds, the more I will suffer when the wheel turns. The more I will suffer when unavoidably, inevitably, the opposite of that praise, the blame, comes. As a teacher, I experience this all the time. There are people out there who praise my teaching and are like, oh, Brother Dave, like, thank you so much. Oh, I get nice messages from the Sangha, from all of you here and other people too, all over the world. Like, thanks for that talk. Thanks for that video. Oh, that helped. I have a steady stream of that kind of nourishment. I'm very, very lucky that way. But let me tell you, I get plenty of blame too. You know, I put a lot of stuff out there. I get trolled. I get negatively commented on the internet. I get nasty messages through social media and on YouTube. I get people in this tradition, in the Plum Village tradition, who basically, in very unkind ways, regularly say things to me like, "Who do you think you are? Isn't Thich Nhat Hanh the teacher? Why don't you just shut up?" It happens. It happens. More often than I'd like. And here we talk about non-identification. If I was very identified with the praise, if what made me happy, what I thought I was someone who did a good job teaching and therefore received praise, and every time I received the opposite, every time the wheel turned and somebody didn't like my video, man, it would hurt me so bad. It would hurt me so bad because I would be so identified with the opposite. And so instead, I practice to sit in the center of the wheel, to sit in the center of the wheel, and not to see myself as somebody who only receives praise and never receives blame, not to see myself as somebody who only gains and never loses, but instead I sit in recognition, acceptance, and investigation into each of the turnings, into all 8 of the extremes that I can experience. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain. I am of a nature to experience all of that and to learn from it, That's what we are. That's what we are, just as impermanent as our seeming environment. Wow, it's been a while since I've used up the whole time in a talk. That was fun. That was fun. Thank you so much for listening, dear Sangha. I'm going to end there, and I'll see you next Sunday. Thank you for your presence and your practice. Peace.